Love Yours, an experimental podcast. Welcome back to another episode of Love Yours, an experimental podcast with me, Charlotte Tahira. And this is series 2, where we are digesting and exploring Black Girl Finance, Let's Talk Money by Selina Flavius. So if this is your first time listening, this podcast is a bit of a book club. It's a bit of a journey for myself. And it's all about making a better world and a better life for ourselves. Whether that's emotional, series 1, or financial, series 2. Maybe series 3 will have to be physical just to balance. And this is episode 5, chapter 4, your credit score. Oh, when you hear that, doesn't it just fill you with fear? So I remember when I first learned about a credit score, what it even was. And it was around the time I got my first phone contract. I think I was about 18 or 19. And it went through without a hitch, which was crazy because at the time I just had a little nationwide building society account. But I had enough of a credit score that I was able to get my first phone contract. And even though I'm not the oldest, I'm one of 10. I have 6 older brothers, 3 younger sisters. Shortly after getting my first phone contract, I got my sister one because she was only 15 and she really wanted a good phone. And it went through and I was like, wow. And before I knew it, I had 4 phone contracts in my name for my sister, my 2 brothers, and myself, because even though I was only 18 or 19, I was the only one with a good credit score. But that didn't last for long, because the problem with taking out any kind of contract for someone else is you're relying on them to stick to the terms of the agreement and pay their bills. And if they're relying on you for your credit score, they're probably not usually very good at sticking to paying their bills on time. And it got so stressful for me. I remember I was starting to have no money because I had to cover their bills until they could pay me back. Otherwise, it kept impacting my credit score. No one cared that the phone, I wasn't using it. Their unreliable payments impacted my credit score. I can't remember how long it lasted. It must have been 2 years. They normally do those phone contracts for 2 years. But the day I could finally cut off all their phones, it felt good. So I did have to learn quite early on about credit score. And this may be the first time you're even thinking about it. I had to learn the difference between hard and soft searches because my mum told me that every rejection you get when you apply for a loan, a credit card, a mortgage, a phone, every rejection impacts your score. Even if you apply for catalogs do it, store cards, there's a lot of layers to this credit score life. So Selina recommends checkmyfile.com if you want more information, more specific geeky information than I'm going to give you now on credit scores. But something she mentions in this chapter is that when you regularly spend over 30% of the credit available to you, it flags signs to lenders that you are struggling or maybe struggling with debt. So what do I mean by that? If I have a £500 credit card and I often spend more than £150 on that credit card, or I often max it out, or I often just make minimal payments even though I've spent almost half or almost the full amount of my credit card limit, lenders think that I'm struggling. And I've had so many different types of credit in my lifetime. So I remember I got a £2,000 loan to get a car. I've had overdrafts when I was in uni that went, I remember when I went travelling, I pushed those to the limit. They started at £250 and Then they got to like 1,200 and something, or like 1,400. I've had credit cards, loans, overdrafts. I recently, just October 2020, finished paying off a £5,000 loan that I took out to, again, buy a car, but also consolidate all my debt. So I cleared off a lot of other little loans and credit cards, and then just had this one monthly payment. So I've been living on credit since as young as I can remember. I started uni at 20, so that's when I got my first credit card, my first overdraft. I've lived on credit, and then even before that, my phone bills. And as I mentioned in episode 2 around money mindset, growing up, this was very normal in my house to live on credit. For my mum, it was the catalogue, but credit cards as well. They had at least 6 or I might be exaggerating. At least 2 or 3. I remember my mum going, got to move this money here for this credit card and this money here for that credit card and meet that minimum payment. So Selina says the first step to understanding your credit score is finding out your credit score. And luckily, Experian now lets you do this for free. I remember back when I checked, when I was like in my early 20s, you had to sign up for a 30-day trial and cancel it, otherwise they charged you. But now they let you do it for free. And so obviously I checked mine, and it actually said that I have 999 out of 999. Your score means you're all set to search for competitive credit cards, loans and mortgages. It's excellent. It's dark green. On Experian, there's dark green, there's light green, there's yellow, there's orange and there's red. And I am in the dark green. I'm good to go. Not that I want any credit at the moment, but trust me, it hasn't always been that way. It's easy for me to laugh now. I've cleared off my loan. As I mentioned in the previous episode, I still have my big fat student loan to pay off. But I guess because I make regular payments, that doesn't impact my credit score because I pay it back. Now, when I use my credit card, I use it for 2 reasons. One, to book flights. And that's because if something happens to my flight, credit cards have, it's loose and it's who knows what would really happen, but credit cards have more of a kind of insurance policy against things you buy on your credit card if something goes wrong. So when I'm booking flights, I book them on my credit card. By the way, my credit card's only a £500 limit. They've offered me to increase it. I always get little notifications about, do you want this loan? Do you want this? No, I don't want an overdraft. I don't want a loan. I don't want to increase my credit card because I don't need more than £500. Leave me alone. And the only other thing I use my credit card for is when money's getting low, and I'm not saying I have £0 in my account, but when it gets under a certain amount, I just start to feel a bit uncomfortable. And so then I may use my credit card for things like groceries, because I know that I'm not going to go wild in the supermarket. Although my last food shop did come to £300. I only use my credit card for purchases that I know I can afford to pay back. And it's ironic because Selina actually talks about this. So she mentions the not going over the 30%. So for me, with my £500 limit, that would be not going over £150 spends, especially if I'm not going to be able to pay them back before they're due. So her top tips for improving your credit score are: use your credit card sensibly. Seems quite obvious, to be honest. But in university, I definitely didn't use it sensibly. I definitely would withdraw cash and get dirty charges just so I could go raving. She also says that multiple applications are harmful. You know, when you're really stressed and you're like, I just need some money. And so you start searching all these different loan companies, payday loans, short-term loans. With every rejection, it is noted. Every time you apply, it is noted on your credit score. And apparently the number of applications you make contributes to 10% of your credit score. Wild. Changing address impacts it, which I think is so cheeky because as someone who moved 13 times in 2 years, like, I don't know how I've got a decent credit score. When I think about it though, I did always used to just keep my post going to my mum's address, because I knew where I was moving to was never going to be my final stop. Obviously, not everyone has that option. As much as my mum kicked me out, she would still give me my post. But for some people, moving around a lot, that's just what you have to do, and you have to keep up with your addresses. And apparently the reason changing address impacts it is because it shows you're less stable, which normally when you're moving around a lot you are, but that's so rude that it impacts your credit score. I don't agree with that at all. Not being registered to vote can actually impact your credit score, which is wild. Do you see how the government get you? And then even things like personal information, if it's not accurate or up to date, if there's spelling errors, it can impact your credit score. So because someone didn't know how to spell Sharla, I know it's not the most simple name to spell, but because you made an error on something, that can impact my credit score. The obvious one is missing payments or making payments late. So 35% of your credit score is impacted by this, which is a massive chunk. And this is why and probably why I have decent credit, whenever I have a loan or credit card or anything like that I know I have to pay, in my head it's part of the rent. You know, there's certain things that you just know you have to put money aside for. Anything to do with credit cards or loans, just put that money aside. Obviously if you can't, you can't, but I mean, don't be booking a holiday knowing you've got a loan payment and you'll just freeze it this month and you'll do a late payment next month and make up for it, because down the line you're gonna have a bad credit score. And then Selina mentions a few other things like county court judgments, bankruptcy, individual voluntary arrangements. These are all basically big words that I would advise you to Google if you are really going through some hardship at the moment with debt. And they are all things that impact your credit score and are public to lenders. So they can impact your ability to borrow money or get credit for up to 5 to 6 years. Imagine, because you stop paying your phone bill for a couple of months, 6 years later, you can't get a mortgage even though you have savings. Because Selina has said they also hold a lot of weight when calculating your credit score. She's also mentioned that the longer you're able to manage a credit card or a loan and like do those repayments consistently without missing any, the better. And up to 15% of your credit score can be improved by just paying your bills on time. I don't know how many times I've said credit score in the last 5 minutes. Oh my gosh. But it's something that our families and our schools don't teach us as children. Finances is such a second thought, considering it's such an important part of society and being successful in society. And I think until we really take a moment to like assess our finances, whether that's a really deep moment because we're in a really dark place with our finances, or like me, thankfully, after 13 years of struggle, I'm in a much more stable place with my finances, and I can see where there's still work to be made, but I'm not like struggling to put food on the table. We need to be having these conversations, and I'm going to make sure that River knows about all these things from a really young age, because she needs to. Living in this Western world, it's not like the old days where you trade a couple of eggs for some milk. Money is literally what makes the world go round, unfortunately. So if you check your credit score with Experian and it's super low, don't stress, okay? There are things you can do. Selina talks about them all in chapter 4 of your credit score. I've talked about some of them just now. And if you need like more specific help, I would look for some charities online that help with financial advice. And until then, I'll leave you with a bit of hope from Rosa Parks, who says, "To bring about change, you must not be afraid to take the first step. We will fail when we fail to try. So remember, that first step is just finding out your credit score." I think I've said credit score enough times in this episode. So I will see you on the next episode, which is chapter 5, tackling debt. And after this big conversation about our credit score, I'm sure if yours comes up low, you're going to want to listen to that one. Make sure you like, share, subscribe, and I'll speak to you soon. Love Yours, an experimental podcast